"I'm her lover," he declares, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade, silencing the venomous words aimed at her. In the heart of a rose garden, where beauty meets prejudice, a billionaire steps forward to defend the woman who's captured his heart. Welcome, listeners. Where are you tuning in from today? Drop a comment below and let us know. Maybe you're near a garden as enchanting as this one. What do you think happens when a past promise meets a present spark? Will love bloom or will secrets unravel? Dive into this tale of courage, romance, and rediscovery, but don't miss a single moment. Subscribe now to catch our latest stories and share where you're watching from. Will their bond withstand the thorns of doubt? Stick around to find out and let us know your predictions in the comments. Hit that subscribe button and let's begin. The crimson bloom garden shimmered under the dawn's tender embrace, its rows of roses stretching like a living tapestry across the rolling hills. Petals of ruby red, blush pink, and creamy white caught the first light, their edges kissed with dew that sparkled like diamonds. Amid this symphony of color and fragrance knelt Kendra, a vision of grace with skin like polished ebony, her long raven hair cascading over her shoulders in waves that seemed to dance with the breeze. Her hands, calloused yet gentle, moved with reverence, tending each bloom as if it held a secret only she could hear. She wore a simple green apron, the fabric stained with earth, but it did nothing to dim her beauty, a beauty that seemed to belong to the roses themselves, vibrant and unyielding. Kendra's fingers brushed a velvety petal, her touch coaxing life into a rose that had begun to droop. She hummed softly, a jazz melody her grandmother used to sing, its notes rising and falling like a river weaving through the garden. Her voice, rich and soulful, carried a quiet strength, wrapping the roses in a warmth that felt almost tangible. To Kendra, this garden was more than a workplace. It was her sanctuary, a refuge from a world that often met her with cold eyes and sharper words. Here, among the roses, she could be herself, unjudged, unbroken, alive. Each bloom reminded her of her grandmother's stories, tales of resilience whispered under starlit skies, and as she sang, she felt those stories come alive, grounding her in a place where she belonged. The garden was quiet that morning, save for the hum of bees and the rustle of leaves. Kendra worked alone, her movements precise yet fluid, as if she were part of the earth itself. She clipped a wilted bud, her shears snipping with a soft click, and paused to inhale the sweet, heady scent of a nearby rose. Her eyes, dark and luminous, softened with a private joy. This was her domain, where prejudice couldn't reach her, where her worth wasn't measured by the color of her skin, but by the care she poured into every petal. Yet beneath her calm exterior, a familiar weight lingered, bills piling up at home, the ache of long hours, the quiet fear that she'd never be seen as more than an outsider in a world that revered this garden's beauty. Unseen, at the garden's edge stood Landon, a man whose name carried weight in boardrooms and headlines. A billionaire at 35, he was known for his sharp intellect and reserved demeanor, his life a polished facade of wealth and control. Today, he'd come to Crimson Bloom on a whim, seeking inspiration for a new venture, a chain of botanical cafes perhaps where beauty and nature could intertwine. He wore a tailored gray suit, his blonde hair catching the sunlight, but his usual composure faltered as he stepped through the garden's wrought iron gate. Kendra's voice reached him first, a melody that seemed to pull at his very soul, stopping him in his tracks. He stood behind a trellis half hidden by climbing roses, his breath catching as he saw her. Kendra knelt among the roses, her silhouette framed against the morning light, her song weaving through the air like a spell. Landon's heart thudded, an unfamiliar ache stirring within him. Her beauty was striking, her deep brown skin glowing, her hair a cascade of midnight. But it was more than that. It was the way she moved, as if in conversation with the roses, her hands tender yet sure, her voice a lifeline to something he'd long forgotten. He'd seen beauty before, in ballrooms and penthouses, but this was different. This was raw, unfiltered, alive. He felt like an intruder in her world, yet he couldn't look away, couldn't move. Her song, a blend of sorrow and hope, seemed to speak directly to him, unraveling the walls he'd built around his heart. Landon lingered, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the soft earth. He told himself he was here for research, to study the garden's layout, but his eyes never left Kendra. She stood brushing dirt from her apron and began to prune another row, her voice rising in a new verse, softer now, almost a whisper. Each note felt like a confession, a glimpse into a soul that carried both strength and vulnerability. Landon's mind raced. He wanted to speak to her, to know her name, but something held him back. Fear, perhaps, of shattering the moment, of stepping into a world where he didn't belong. Yet, as she bent to cradle a rose, her fingers tracing its petals with care, he knew he'd return tomorrow, and the day after. As Kendra worked, unaware of the eyes upon her, she felt a quiet peace settle over her. The roses were her companions, their beauty a reminder that she too could bloom despite the thorns of life. She didn't see Landon, didn't know that her song had already changed the course of his heart. The garden held its breath, as if sensing the spark of something new, something destined to grow. For now, Kendra sang on, her voice a beacon in the morning light, and Landon stood captivated, a man on the edge of a journey he couldn't yet name. The afternoon sun hung heavy over the crimson bloom garden, casting dappled shadows across the rose beds, where Kendra moved with her usual grace. Her ebony hair, tied loosely with a green ribbon, swayed as she knelt, her fingers deftly clipping a wilted bud from a rosebush. The air was thick with the scent of earth and petals, a perfume that usually soothed her. But today, Kendra's heart felt a subtle unease. She wore her worn green apron, its pockets stuffed with pruning shears and twine, her deep brown skin glistening with a faint sheen of sweat. The garden, her sanctuary, was quieter than usual. The bees' hum muted, as if the roses themselves sensed a storm brewing. Kendra's hands worked steadily, but her mind wandered to the weight of her life beyond the garden's gates. Rent was due soon, her landlord's curt reminders echoing in her thoughts, and the long hours tending roses left her bones aching. Yet she pushed forward, her love for the garden anchoring her. Each rose was a testament to her resilience, a reminder of her grandmother's words, "Bloom where you're planted, no matter the soil." She began to hum, a soft jazz tune, her voice a low, soulful thread weaving through the stillness. The melody steadied her, a shield against the world's harsh edges, but it couldn't drown out the sharp voice that suddenly pierced the air. "You're doing it wrong," snapped Claire, a white woman standing a few paces away, her arms crossed and lips curled in disdain. Her blonde hair was pulled into a tight bun, her designer sunglasses glinting with an air of superiority. Kendra's hands stilled, the shears hovering mid-cut, her breath catching. Claire's words were not about the roses. Kendra's work was flawless, each bush pruned with precision, but about something deeper, uglier. "People like you don't belong in a place this refined," Claire continued, her voice dripping with venom, each syllable laced with racial contempt. "I'll have a word with the owner. You're out of here." Kendra's heart pounded, a familiar sting blooming in her chest. She'd faced prejudice before, whispers in grocery stores, sidelong glances at bus stops. But here, in her garden, it cut deeper, like a thorn-piercing skin. Her eyes, dark and luminous, fixed on the rose before her, its petals a soft pink, fragile yet defiant. She wanted to snap back, to defend her place, but years of navigating such hostility had taught her restraint. Words could be twisted, her anger weaponized against her. Instead, she resumed pruning, the snip of her shears steady, deliberate, a quiet act of rebellion. Her voice, though, faltered, the jazz melody dying in her throat. Claire stepped closer, her heels clicking on. The stone path, her presence a shadow over Kendra's work. "Do you even know what these roses are worth?" she sneered, gesturing to the blooms as if Kendra were a trespasser in their midst. "This garden is for people who understand beauty, not you." The word "you" hung in the air, heavy with implication, a judgment on Kendra's skin, her existence. Kendra's fingers tightened around the shears, her knuckles straining, but she kept her gaze on the roses, their beauty a lifeline. She thought of her grandmother, whose hands had tended flowers under harsher suns, whose stories had taught her to stand tall, even when the world tried to crush her. Inside, Kendra's emotions churned, a mix of anger, shame, and a bone-deep weariness. Why did her presence provoke such venom? She'd earned her role here, her skill evident in every thriving bush. Yet to Claire, she was an intruder, her worth reduced to the color of her skin. The garden, once a haven, felt smaller now, its borders closing in. She wanted to flee, to hide from Claire's gaze, but she wouldn't. Not today. She clipped another bud, the motion precise, her silence louder than any retort. The roses seemed to lean toward her, as if whispering encouragement, their fragrance a reminder of her right to be here. Claire's eyes narrowed, sensing Kendra's defiance in her steady hands. "You think ignoring me will help?" she hissed, her voice low, almost intimate in its cruelty. "I know people who can make sure you're gone by tomorrow." The threat landed like a stone, rippling through Kendra's resolve. She thought of her apartment, the bills, the life she'd clawed together through sheer will. Losing this job would unravel everything. Yet she refused to look up, refused to give Claire the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. Her fingers moved to the next rose, her touch gentle despite the storm in her chest. As Claire turned to leave, her heels clicking with finality, Kendra exhaled, her breath shaky. She resumed her humming, softer now, the melody a fragile thread pulling her back from the edge. The roses stood vibrant around her, their beauty unmarred by Claire's words, and Kendra drew strength from them. She wouldn't let this break her. She'd faced worse and bloomed still. Unseen at the garden's edge, a figure lingered behind. A trellis, his jaw tight, his heart stirred by the injustice he'd witnessed. But for now, Kendra worked on, her song a quiet defiance, the roses her witness, as the shadows of prejudice loomed but failed to dim her light. The crimson bloom. Garden pulsed with the heat of late afternoon, its roses aglow under a sky streaked with gold. Kendra knelt among the blooms, her ebony hair catching the light, her deep brown skin warm against the green of her apron. Her hands, steady despite the morning's wounds, cradled a rose, its petals soft as a whispered promise. She worked in silence now, her jazz melody abandoned, the sting of Claire's earlier venom still lingering like a bruise. The garden, her refuge, felt fragile, its beauty no shield against the hostility that had invaded her peace. Each snip of her shears was deliberate, a quiet defiance, but her heart thrummed with unease, as if the roses themselves held their breath. Claire's shadow loomed again, her heels clicking on the stone path like the ticking of a clock counting down to conflict. She stood closer this time, her blonde bun severe, her eyes glinting with malice behind her sunglasses. "Still here?" she sneered, her voice sharp enough to cut. "I told you you don't belong. I've spoken to the owners. Assistant already, you're finished." The lie dripped from her lips, calculated to wound, to unravel Kendra's fragile hold on this place. Kendra's fingers tightened around the shears, her pulse quickening, but she kept her gaze on the rose, its red petals a focal point against the storm rising within her. She wouldn't rise to the bait, wouldn't give Claire the satisfaction of seeing her break. "You're ignoring me?" Claire's voice rose, laced with indignation. "This garden is for people who appreciate its worth, not some outsider mucking it up." The word outsider landed like a slap, its racial undertones unmistakable. Kendra's chest tightened, memories of past slights flashing through her mind. Children taunting her at school, employers dismissing her without cause. Yet, she remained still, her silence a fortress, her hands moving to the next bloom. The roses seemed to lean toward her, their fragrance a faint comfort, but Claire's presence was a suffocating weight, her words a blade poised to strike deeper. Before Kendra could brace for the next assault, A new sound broke the tension. Footsteps, firm and purposeful, crunching on the gravel path. "That's enough," a voice declared, calm yet unyielding, slicing through Claire's tirade like a sword. Kendra's head snapped up, her eyes meeting Landon's. He stood at the edge of the rosebed, his tailored gray suit a stark contrast to the garden's wild beauty, his blonde hair catching the sun's dying rays. His presence was commanding, his jaw set, his blue eyes blazing with a quiet fury that made the air crackle. Claire spun around, startled, her sunglasses slipping slightly. "Who are you to interfere?" she demanded, her voice faltering under his gaze. Landon stepped forward, his movements deliberate, his eyes never leaving Claire. He stopped beside Kendra, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, a gesture both protective and grounding. "I'm her lover," he said, his voice steady, the words ringing with an authority that silenced the garden. Kendra's breath caught, her heart lurching in her chest. Lover? She barely knew him. His name, his frequent visits, the polite nods they'd exchanged. Why would he claim such a thing? Her eyes darted to his face, searching for answers, but his expression was resolute, a shield against Claire's venom. Claire scoffed, a brittle laugh escaping her lips. "Her lover?" she mocked, her gaze flicking to Kendra with disdain. "You expect me to believe that?" Landon's hand tightened briefly on Kendra's shoulder, a silent reassurance, before he stepped closer to Claire, his presence towering. "I don't care what you believe," he said, his voice low, dangerous. "You have no right to speak to her that way. Leave now, or I'll ensure you're banned from this garden permanently." His words carried the weight of his wealth, his influence, but it was the fire in his eyes that made Claire falter, her bravado crumbling. For a moment, Claire stood frozen, her lips parting as if to retort, but the steel in Landon's gaze stopped her. With a final, venomous glance at Kendra, she turned, her heels clicking furiously as she stormed down the path, her silhouette shrinking against the roses. The garden exhaled, the tension dissipating like mist, the blooms swaying, as if in relief. Kendra remained rooted, her shears forgotten in her hand, her mind reeling. Landon's touch lingered on her shoulder, warm and steady, but his words, "I'm her lover," echoed louder, a mystery wrapped in courage. She turned to him, her voice soft, trembling. "Why did you say that?" Her dark eyes searched his, a mix of shock and curiosity swirling within them. Landon's expression softened, a hint of nervousness breaking through his resolve. "Because I couldn't stand by and let her hurt you," he said, his voice quieter now, almost vulnerable. "And because I've wanted to talk to you for weeks." He gestured to a bench beneath a trellis draped with climbing roses, its wood worn smooth by time. "Can we sit?" Kendra hesitated, her heart still racing, Claire's words clashing with Landon's unexpected defense. The roses around her stood vibrant, their fragrance urging her forward, a reminder of her strength. She nodded, setting her shears on the ground, her apron brushing against her knees as she followed him. The bench creaked under their weight, the roses framing them like a living curtain. Landon's eyes met hers, earnest and unguarded, and for the first time, Kendra saw not just a visitor, but a man who'd risked his pride to stand for her. The garden held its breath, its beauty a witness to a moment that felt like the edge of something new, something unspoken, but undeniable. The crimson bloom garden sighed into twilight, its roses bathed in the soft lavender glow of dusk. There, petals kissed by the fading sun seemed to pulse with secrets, their fragrance weaving a delicate spell around the trellis where Kendra and Landon sat. The wooden bench creaked beneath them, its surface worn smooth by years of whispered confessions. Kendra's green apron lay folded beside her, her ebony hair spilling over her shoulders, catching the last light like a river of midnight. Her deep brown skin glowed with a quiet warmth, but her hands clasped tightly in her lap betrayed a tremor of uncertainty. Landon's words, "I'm her lover," still echoed in her mind, a bold declaration that had shattered the venom of her tormentor, but left her heart in a whirl of questions. Landon sat beside her, his tailored gray suit slightly rumpled, a rare crack in his polished facade. His blue eyes, usually sharp with the weight of his world, softened as they met hers, a flicker of nervousness dancing within them. The roses framed them like a living curtain, their blooms swaying as if urging the moment forward. "I meant what I said," Landon began, his voice low, earnest. "Not the part about us being, well, you know." He faltered, a faint flush creeping up his neck. "But about not letting anyone hurt you. I've watched you, Kendra, every day for weeks. Your voice, the way you tend these roses, it's like you breathe life into them. I've never seen anything so beautiful." Kendra's breath caught, her heart thudding against her ribs. His words were a balm to the wounds of the day, yet they stirred a deeper fear. Compliments were rare in her world, often laced with ulterior motives, and Landon's sincerity disarmed her. She looked away, her gaze settling on a pink rose, its petals curling inward like a guarded heart. "You don't even know me," she said softly, her voice threaded with caution. "I'm just a gardener. Why would someone like you care?" The question hung between them, raw and vulnerable, a challenge born from years of being unseen, undervalued. Landon leaned forward, his hands resting on his knees as if closing the distance could bridge the chasm of her doubt. "Because you're not just anything," he said, his tone firm yet gentle. "I see you, Kendra. The way you hum those jazz tunes like they're stories you're telling the roses. The way you touch each bloom like it's a friend. You make this garden more than a place. It's alive because of you." His eyes held hers, unyielding, and for a moment Kendra felt exposed, as if he saw not just her work, but the heart she poured into it. She swallowed, her fingers twisting together, the weight of his gaze both thrilling and terrifying. "This garden's all I have," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It reminds me of my grandmother. She'd tell me stories about roses, how they bloom even in the hardest soil. Singing keeps her close, keeps me grounded." The confession slipped out, a piece of her soul laid bare, and she braced for judgment, for the dismissal she'd known too often. But Landon's expression didn't waver. Instead, a slow smile curved his lips, warm and unguarded. "I get that," he said, his voice softening. "I collect old jazz records. Miles Davis, Ella Fitzgerald. My dad used to play them when I was a kid, said they held the world's truths. I listen when I need to remember who I am." Kendra's eyes widened, surprise flickering through her. She hadn't expected a billionaire to share her love for jazz, to carry a piece of the same soulful world. "And," he added, a touch of mischief in his tone, "I take photos. Nothing fancy, just moments. Sunsets, flowers. I've got a few of these roses, though I'm no artist like you." Kendra blinked, caught off guard. "You've seen my sketches?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. She'd left, a few drawings in the garden shed, quick pencil strokes of roses and vines, never meant for anyone's eyes. Landon nodded, his smile sheepish. "I peeked. They're incredible, Kendra. You see the roses the way I wish I could." The compliment warmed her, a spark igniting in her chest, but doubt lingered, a shadow she couldn't shake. Could she trust this man, this stranger who seemed to see her so clearly? The roses rustled in the evening breeze, their scent wrapping around them like a promise. Kendra took a breath, her voice steadier now. "I don't let people in easily," she said, meeting his gaze. "Too many have tried to take more than I can give." Landon nodded, his expression sober. "I don't want to take anything, Kendra. I want to know you." His sincerity was a weight, a challenge, and for the first time Kendra felt the urge to step toward it, to let her guard slip, if only a fraction. "Kendra," Landon said, his voice dropping, "let me take you to dinner. A real date. At my restaurant, La Lumière. Tomorrow night." The invitation hung in the air, bold yet fragile, like a rosebud on the verge of blooming. Kendra's heart raced, her instincts warring, fear of rejection, of stepping into a world where she might not belong, clashed with the warmth of his gaze, the promise of something new. She thought of her grandmother, who'd faced a world far crueler and still bloomed. "All right," she said finally, a shy smile breaking through, her voice trembling with hope. "I'd like that." Landon's face lit up, a boyish grin that made her heart skip. "Tomorrow then," he said, standing, his hand brushing hers for a fleeting moment, electric and fleeting. As he walked away, his silhouette fading into the twilight, Kendra remained on the bench, the roses whispering around her. Her fingers traced the edge of the trellis, her mind a whirl of fear and possibility. The garden felt different now, alive with a spark she hadn't known it could hold, and as the stars began to pierce the sky, Kendra wondered if she, too, could bloom in ways she'd never dared dream. The evening air was soft with the promise of summer, a gentle breeze carrying the faint scent of roses as Kendra stepped toward La Lumiere, Landon's renowned restaurant. Her white dress hugged her curves, its simplicity a quiet elegance that set off her deep brown skin, glowing like polished ebony under the streetlights. Her long raven hair was swept up, secured with a delicate silver hairpin that glinted like a star. Kendra's heart fluttered, a mix of anticipation and nerves, her fingers brushing the hem of her dress as she approached the grand entrance. The restaurant's glass facade shimmered, its warm light spilling onto the cobblestone path, a world of luxury she'd never dared enter. Tonight she was no gardener, but a woman stepping into possibility, her pulse quickening at the thought of Landon's smile, his earnest invitation echoing in her mind. She paused at the door, smoothing her dress, her reflection in the glass a fleeting reminder of her grandmother's words. "Bloom where you're planted." This was her chance to bloom, to trust the spark she'd felt in the garden. She pushed open the door, the soft chime of a bell announcing her arrival, but the warmth she'd expected was snuffed out by the hostess's cold gaze. The young woman, her blonde hair pulled into a sleek ponytail, stood behind a polished podium, her forced smile thinning as her eyes flicked over Kendra's skin. "The restaurant's fully booked," she said, her voice sharp, dismissive. "You shouldn't be here." Kendra's breath caught, the words a slap she knew too well. She straightened, her voice steady despite the sting. "I'm here for reservation with Landon. My name's Kendra." The hostess's eyes narrowed, a flicker of disdain crossing her face. "Landon," she repeated, her tone laced with skepticism. "I don't have any record of that." "You must be mistaken." Another staff member, a man in a crisp suit, approached, his gaze equally cutting. "Maybe try somewhere more your kind of place," he added, his words dripping with prejudice, each syllable a reminder of the barriers Kendra had faced her whole life. Her hands trembled, clutching her small purse, the silver hairpin suddenly feeling heavy in her hair. The rejection was a familiar wound, yet here, in a place where she'd hoped to be seen, it cut deeper. She wanted to argue, to demand they check again, but the weight of their stares pinned her in place. Memories flooded back, whispers in crowded rooms, doors closed before she could knock. Was this what stepping into Landon's world meant? A world that saw her skin before her heart? Her chest tightened, the joy of the evening unraveling, her hope fraying like a rose petal in a storm. Just as she turned to leave, her heart sinking, a familiar voice sliced through the tension. "What's going on here?" Landon's tone was like steel, his presence filling the foyer as he strode forward. His tailored navy suit was impeccable, but his blue eyes blazed with fury, his jaw set. The hostess faltered, her composure cracking. "Sir, we were just—" she stammered, but Landon cut her off, his gaze shifting to Kendra, softening with concern before hardening as he faced the staff. "You're speaking to my guest of honor," he said, his voice low, dangerous. "Kendra is why this dinner is happening. Your behavior is unacceptable. You're both fired." The words landed like a thunderclap, the hostess's face draining of color, the man beside her stuttering an apology that Landon ignored. He stepped to Kendra's side, his hand brushing her arm, warm and grounding. "I'm so sorry." he said, his voice softer now, laced with regret. You deserve better than this. Kendra's throat tightened, her eyes stinging, but she managed a nod, his touch anchoring her against the tide of humiliation. The staff slunk away, their dismissal a quiet justice, but the wound of their words lingered, a shadow on her heart. Landon took her hand, his grip gentle yet firm, and led her through the restaurant's arched doorway. The interior was a vision of intimacy, transformed into a candle-lit haven. A single table stood at the center, adorned with roses from the crimson bloom garden, their petals glowing in the flickering light. The space was empty, reserved solely for them, a sanctuary carved from the world's cruelty. Landon pulled out a chair for her, his eyes never leaving her face. You look breathtaking, he said, his voice low, sincere. And Kendra felt a spark rekindle, her heart stirring despite the ache. As they sat, the candles casting a golden glow on Kendra's skin, she felt the weight of the moment shift. The rejection at the door had been a blade, but Landon's defense was a shield, his presence a promise that she wasn't alone. Her fingers brushed a rose on the table, its fragrance a reminder of the garden, of her strength. She looked at Landon, his gaze warm, unwavering, and for the first time that night, a small smile curved her lips. The world outside could judge, but here, in this candlelit haven, Kendra felt seen, valued, and on the cusp of something extraordinary. The candlelight in La Lumière danced like liquid gold, casting a warm glow over the single table where Kendra and Landon sat, surrounded by roses from the crimson bloom garden. Their petals, red and pink, seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the moment, their fragrance mingling with the scent of roasted herbs and wine. Kendra's white dress clung to her curves, her deep brown skin radiant, the silver hairpin in her ebony hair catching the flicker of flames. Her heart, still tender from the sting of rejection at the restaurant's door, now thrummed with a cautious hope, stirred by Landon's unwavering gaze. He sat across from her, his navy suit tailored to perfection, but it was his eyes, blue as a summer sky, soft with something unspoken, that held her captive. The table was a small island in the empty restaurant, a haven carved for them alone. Kendra's fingers brushed a rose, its velvet petals grounding her as she met Landon's smile. This place, she said, her voice soft. It's like a dream. Landon leaned forward, his elbow resting on the table, his grin boyish yet earnest. I wanted tonight to be special, Kendra. You deserve that. His words wrapped around her, warm and disarming, but a flicker of doubt lingered in her chest. Could she trust this moment, this man, after a lifetime of guarded walls? Their conversation flowed like a gentle stream, weaving through shared tastes, her love for jazz, his secret collection of vinyl records, and quiet dreams. Kendra spoke of sketching roses, how each petal captured a story, and Landon confessed his photography, how he chased fleeting moments of beauty. Each revelation felt like a petal unfolding, revealing the tender core of their connection. Yet, as the waiter cleared their plates, leaving only wine glasses and the glow of candles, Landon's demeanor shifted. His smile faded, replaced by a quiet intensity, his fingers drumming lightly on the tablecloth as if gathering courage. Kendra, he began, his voice low, trembling with emotion. There's something I need to tell you. Her breath hitched, her eyes locking onto, his sensing the weight of what was to come. Before she could speak, Landon slid from his chair, dropping to one knee beside her, a velvet box appearing in his hand like a magician's trick. The candlelight caught the sparkle of a diamond ring within, its brilliance a star against the dark fabric. Kendra's heart stopped, her mind reeling. A proposal? They'd only just begun to know each other. How could this be? I know this seems sudden, Landon said, his voice steady now, though his eyes shimmered with vulnerability. But you're not a stranger to me, Kendra. You're my first love. The words hung between them, a revelation that turned the air electric. When we were kids, you were the girl who stood up for me when bullies cornered me at school. You taught me to be brave, to stand tall. When you moved away, I was heartbroken. I've spent years looking for you and finding you in that garden. It was fate. Kendra's breath caught, memories flooding back like a tide. A shy boy with kind eyes, his lunch tray was knocked to the ground by cruel hands. She'd stepped in, her small frame fierce, her voice sharp as she told the bullies to back off. Landon, Landon, had been her friend, her confidant until her family's sudden move tore them apart. She'd tucked those memories away, a bittersweet ache, never dreaming they'd resurface. Tears welled in her eyes, her voice trembling. "I've thought of you too," she whispered, her hand reaching for his. "I wondered if you were happy, if you remembered me." Landon's smile was radiant, tinged with relief. "I'm happy now, Kendra, because I found you." He took her hand, his touch warm, grounding. "Will you marry me?" The question was a melody, soft yet powerful, echoing the jazz notes they both loved. Kendra's heart raced, a whirlwind of emotions. Shock, love, fear of a future too vast to grasp. Her past had taught her to guard her heart, to expect betrayal, but Landon's gaze was a beacon, unwavering, true. She thought of her grandmother, who'd bloomed through hardship, and of the roses that thrived despite thorns. Tears spilled down her cheeks, her voice barely audible. "Yes," she said, the word a leap, a bloom. "Yes, Landon." His face lit up, a joy so pure it stole her breath. He slipped the ring onto her finger, the diamond catching the candlelight like a promise sealed in fire. As he stood, pulling her into his arms, Kendra felt the world shift, the roses around them glowing as if in celebration. His embrace was a sanctuary, his heartbeat a rhythm against hers, and for the first time she let herself believe in a love that could endure. They sank back to their seats, hands entwined, the candles burning low. Kendra laughed through her tears, the ring heavy yet perfect on her finger. "I can't believe it's you," she said, her voice thick with wonder. Landon squeezed her hand, his eyes shining. "It's always been us," he murmured. And in that moment, the restaurant felt like the garden, a place where their love could take root. The roses watched, their petals a silent vow as Kendra and Landon sat, hearts open on the edge of a future they would build together. The candlelight in La Lumiere flickered like stars trapped in amber, bathing the intimate dining table in a warm, golden haze. Roses from the crimson bloom garden adorned the center, their petals curling inward, as if guarding the sacred space where Kendra and Landon sat, hands still entwined. Kendra's white dress shimmered softly, her deep brown skin radiant. The diamond ring on her finger catching the light like a captured spark. Her ebony hair loosened slightly, framed her face, the silver hairpin glinting with quiet defiance. Her heart, newly bound by Landon's proposal, pulsed with a mix of joy and trepidation, the revelation of their childhood connection a bridge to a past she'd thought lost forever. Landon, his navy suit slightly rumpled, leaned closer, his blue eyes soft yet intense, as if he could will away the years that had separated them. The restaurant was their private haven, the silence broken only by the faint clink of wine glasses and the rustle of roses stirred by an unseen breeze. Kendra's fingers traced the ring, its weight a reminder of the leap she'd taken. "I still can't believe it's you," she said, her voice a whisper thick with wonder. Landon's smile was tender, his hand tightening around hers. "I've carried you with me, Kendra, all these years," he murmured, his voice a melody that stirred her soul. The air between them crackled with unspoken questions, a hunger to reclaim the fragments of their shared past, to weave them into the fragile tapestry of this moment. Kendra took a breath, her gaze drifting to a rose, its red petals a mirror to her racing heart. "Tell me," she said, her voice steadying, "what happened after I left?" The question was a key, unlocking memories she'd buried under years of struggle. Landon's expression softened, a shadow of old pain crossing his face. It was hard, he admitted, his voice low. You were my shield, Kendra. When those kids bullied me, calling me weak, shoving me in the schoolyard, you stood up for me. After you moved, I felt lost. I had to learn to fight my own battles. He paused, his thumb brushing her knuckles. Your courage shaped me. It's why I built what I have. Every deal, every success, was me trying to be as brave as you were. Her eyes stung, memories flooding back. A scrawny boy with kind eyes, his lunch tray scattered across the dirt, her young voice fierce as she faced his tormentors. I didn't feel brave, she confessed, her voice trembling. I was scared, but I couldn't let them hurt you. You were special. The admission hung between them, raw and unguarded, a thread pulling them closer. She thought of her family's sudden move, her father's job loss forcing them to a new city, and the ache of leaving Landon behind. I wanted to write, to find you, but life got in the way, she said, her voice breaking. We were barely scraping by. I had to grow up fast. Landon nodded, his gaze never leaving her. I looked for you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Every time I passed a garden, heard a jazz song, I hoped it was you. I built La Lumiere, these businesses, but they were empty without you. His honesty was a weight, pressing against Kendra's heart, stirring fears she'd long suppressed. Could she fit into his world, so vast and gilded when hers had been carved from hardship? She thought of her grandmother, whose stories of resilience had sustained her and found her voice. Your world, Landon. It's so different. I'm just a gardener, a single woman who's fought for every inch. What if I don't belong? His eyes darkened, a fierce sincerity burning within them. You're my world, Kendra, he said, his voice firm. You always have been. I don't care about wealth or status. You're the one who taught me what strength means. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing a stray lock of her hair, the gesture tender, electric. I see you, Kendra, not as a gardener, but as the woman who makes roses bloom, who makes my heart beat. Her breath hitched, his words a balm to wounds she hadn't named, a promise that she was enough. Kendra's smile trembled, her fears softening under his gaze. You remember the promise we made? She asked, her voice soft, a memory surfacing like a rose breaking through soil. Under that old oak tree, we said we'd always be friends no matter what. Landon's laugh was warm, a sound that wrapped around her like a blanket. I held on to that, he said. It's why I never stopped looking. They laughed together, the sound mingling with the rose's fragrance, a moment of lightness in the weight of their reunion. As the candles burned low, Kendra felt her heart open, a bloom unfurling after a long winter. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice barely audible. But I want this, us. Landon's hand tightened around hers, his eyes shining with hope. We'll face it together, he promised, and in that moment the restaurant felt like the garden, a place where their love could take root. The roses stood sentinel, their petals a testament to a past reclaimed, as Kendra and Landon sat, hearts entwined, ready to write a new chapter from the echoes of their youth. The crimson bloom garden shimmered under the late summer sun, its roses bursting with a riot of color, ruby reds, soft pinks, and creamy whites that seemed to celebrate the new rhythm of Kendra and Landon's life. The air was thick with the heady scent of blooms, a perfume that wrapped around them like a vow. Kendra stood among the rose beds, her ebony hair cascading freely, her deep brown skin glowing with a warmth that rivaled the petals she tended. Her green apron was gone, replaced by a flowing sundress, its soft blue fabric swaying as she clipped a rose with gentle precision. The diamond ring on her finger sparkled, a quiet reminder of the promise that had changed everything. Her heart, once guarded by thorns, now bloomed with a hope she'd never dared embrace. Landon worked beside her, his tailored shirt sleeves rolled up, a smudge of earth on his cheek. His blonde hair caught the sunlight, his blue eyes alight with a joy that softened the sharp edges of his billionaire persona. He held a pair of shears awkwardly, his hands more accustomed to boardroom pens than garden tools. But his laughter rang out as he fumbled, the sound mingling with Kendra's soft hum of a jazz melody. The garden, once her solitary refuge, had become their shared sanctuary, a place where their love took root, nurtured by moments of quiet togetherness. Each rose they tended felt like a step toward a future they were building, petal by petal. Weeks had passed since the candlelit night, La Lumière, and their engagement had set their world ablaze with possibility. The staff at the restaurant, retrained with a mandate of respect, now greeted Kendra with warmth, their earlier prejudice a fading shadow. The whispers of Claire's venom, the sting of rejection, were distant echoes, drowned out by the laughter that filled their days. Kendra's life had shifted. She still tended the garden, her skill unmatched, but now she did so as Landon's partner, her presence a beacon of strength and grace. The roses, as if sensing her joy, seemed to bloom brighter, their petals unfurling like her heart. This morning they worked side by side, pruning a row of roses that had grown wild. Kendra's hands moved with practiced ease, her shears snipping. With a soft click, while Landon followed her lead, his brow furrowed in concentration. "You make this look easy," he teased, holding up a crookedly cut stem. Kendra's laugh was a melody, her eyes sparkling. "Years of practice," she said, brushing a petal from his shirt. "But you're learning. These roses like you." Her words were light, but her gaze held a deeper truth. The garden had accepted him just as she had. Landon set down his shears, his hand finding hers, his touch warm and grounding. "This place," he said, his voice low, "it's our home now, you, me, these roses." He gestured to the blooms, their colors a testament to their shared care. Kendra's heart swelled, the weight of his words sinking in. Home had always been a fragile concept for her, built on struggle and resilience, but with Landon it felt solid, real. She thought of her grandmother, whose stories had taught her to bloom through hardship, and felt her presence in the roses, nodding in approval. They paused by a trellis draped with climbing roses, its vines heavy with blooms. Landon knelt, picking a perfect red rose, its petals velvet soft. He tucked it behind Kendra's ear, his fingers lingering, the gesture tender yet electric. "You're my sanctuary, Kendra," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I built an empire, but it was empty until you." Her breath hitched, tears pricking her eyes. She'd feared she'd never belong in his world, but here in the garden their differences melted away, their love a bridge stronger than any divide. Kendra leaned into his touch, her voice soft. "I was scared to let you in," she admitted, her eyes tracing the rose in her hair. "But you've given me more than I ever dreamed, a place where I'm seen, loved." Her words were a confession, a bloom of trust, and Landon's smile was radiant, his hand cupping her cheek. "We're just beginning," he murmured, and in his eyes she saw a future. Weddings, laughter, perhaps children running through these roses. As the sun dipped lower, they sat on a stone bench, the garden quiet save for the hum of bees. Kendra hummed her jazz tune, her voice weaving through the air, and Landon joined in, his low hum harmonizing with hers. The roses stood sentinel, their fragrance a vow of endurance, a promise that their love would thrive. Kendra's ring caught the light, a symbol of their commitment, and she felt a peace she'd never known, a certainty that, with Landon, she could face any storm. The garden stretched before them, a canvas of their love, its blooms a testament to a new beginning. Kendra rested her head on Landon's shoulder, her heart full. Challenges might come, whispers, doubts, the world's sharp edges. But here, among the roses, they were unbreakable. Their laughter rose, a song of hope, as the crimson bloom garden cradled them, its petals whispering of a love that would endure, a life they would build, together, forever. And so Kendra and Landon's love blooms eternal, a rose defying life's thorns. What did you think of their journey? Did their rediscovery spark memories of your own first love? Or did the garden's magic steal your heart? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. We'd love to hear them. Your support keeps these stories alive, so hit that subscribe button to catch our next tale of romance and resilience. Where are you listening from? Let us know in the comments. Thank you for joining us in the Crimson Bloom Garden. It's been a joy sharing this journey with you. Until next time, keep blooming where you're planted, and we'll meet again under the roses.